can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. All right. Lord, we love to sing your praise. Lift up your name. Come on, every voice. Help me sing. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. And for once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. Oh, and as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath. They're evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I. Oh, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. Amen. We lift you up. So will I. Come on, let's declare this. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. Oh, if the wind goes where you send it, so will I. Oh, if the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. Oh, if the sun will fall, our praises still fall short. Then we'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. But as you speak, come on, 100 billion failures that disappeared. Oh, but you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've done. you would.
Oops, I cut it off a few seconds early, but that's all right. Hey, guys, good to see you all this Sunday morning, or evening for people in Australia, I suppose. And so Fed is first in the house. Good to see the Fed. And lights a cigar, get some brandy, because you know what? This is the kind of church where you can smoke a cigar and sip some brandy if that suits you. No judgment from me. And in fact, it's funny because last night, Corey, our lead pastor at our church, and by the way, if you ever do watch the Experience Community Church's live streams, last night, man, Corey was on fire, and he just nailed it. And that's kind of why I asked the question in the name of this stream, because we were talking about that to a certain extent. Is that you look around the world, and what do people see when they see Christians? They see hypocrites. They see judgmental people. They see hate. Right? That's what the world sees of Christianity. And that is like the opposite of what Christian behavior should be. A Christian should be honest, a Christian should be loving, and a Christian should not be judgmental. And the reason for that is not just that, they're not, we don't have to endorse things that are antithetical to Christ, but we also should not expect that people who are not followers of Christ to act as if they are. And Corey did a great little thing about the whole thing with Target and the gender-neutral bathrooms, and that there was a rise of Christian pastors that were talking about how horrible Target was because of their gender-neutral bathrooms, and how disgusting it is that they would endorse transgenderism or whatever. And what Corey said, you know what? Here's what you should be doing, is maybe praying for the CEO of Target, praying for the people that work at Target. And, and this was actually a great moment during the services. He said, when you see that person who's transgender, instead of pointing your finger at them and telling them how stupid they are, maybe you buy them a cup of coffee and get to know them a little bit. Maybe you find out some of the things that they've been through in their lives, and some of the things and you can share some of the things you've been through in your life. And maybe, just maybe, that's a human being who is a creation of God just like you are. And maybe you shouldn't be casting hate. So it's actually, and so when I think of Christian behavior, the sad thing to me is that I see the very opposite of what we generally see from Christians. And, and as, again, kind of paraphrasing what Corey was talking about last night, is a religion that's founded on a premise of love, which Christianity is, cannot flourish in an environment where they're being hateful. It just doesn't work. And so that's my sermonizing for today. I wanted to get that off my chest. I thought that Corey was brilliant with the way that he put it, so I'm not going to try to outshine what he did for sure. But Fed, thank you so much for being first, and also for your answer to the question. And it says, Christian behavior technically should follow the tenets of Christ himself: charity, love of one's fellow man, and no doubt a slew of things I've missed, attempts to an ideal, yet endeavor to remain their place, not judging unbelievers nor assuming they are without sin. And man, you nailed it right there, Fed. You absolutely nailed it. Odd Librarian out says, greetings all and have a blessed Lord's Day. How you doing? And then Fed is saying, well, in about 2 hours it'll be morning. Well, right about the time I sign off, then it'll be morning for you. So I'll still say good morning now. Cade says, yo, I'm about to eat. Well, enjoy your breakfast if you're in the United States, or lunch if you're in Europe, or dinner if you're in Australia, or actually closer to a midnight snack. Commander Shran says hello. Darren says the channel killer stream has started. Darren, I will tell you, I've actually been really, really encouraged this week, and I know I shouldn't be, but because YouTube hates independent content creation, and they certainly hate anything that has even the slightest religious tint to it. So you're right that my Sunday stream should be a channel killing event. However, I did something that, shocked a lot of people this last week. I gave Star Trek Lower Decks a 6 out of 10. And in my video, I said, as I've always maintained, that you can disagree with me. I will no doubt say things that you will disagree with from time to time. But I will always and only give you my honest opinion. If I think that something is horrible, I will scream about how horrible it is. If something is, not horrible, like Lower Decks, I'll say that. And if something is awesome, I'll say that too. And I always think back to when I did my Captain Marvel review, because when I did my Captain Marvel review, I lost a slew of subs. And the channel's been sitting there kind of stagnant, about 14,000 since the beginning of the year. And a couple of weeks ago, YouTube knocked me down to like 13,900 and change. And it's been really, really frustrating. So I put out the video of my review of Lower Decks, and I gave it a not horrible score, 6 out of 10. And much to my surprise, my sub count went up this week. So that I'm back over 14,000 again. I was completely flabbergasted by that. So I don't know that this stream is going to kill the channel, but maybe, just maybe, I'm not going to hide who I am, and I'm going to experiment with it. If the channel continues to stagnate, I may eventually move the streams to an alternate channel. But the problem is that, and I know this makes me sound like the greedy bastard that I always joke that I am. But the honest truth of it is that, because ad revenue on YouTube really sucks, and because YouTube won't recommend my videos because I'm not a corporate channel or anything, then the only way that I make any money off of YouTube is through super chats and stuff. So if I move all my live streams to a non-monetized channel, I just shot myself in the foot, and it makes it so that, I'm going to have to put in a lot more hours of work or eventually get a second job just to pay the bills. So rather than do that, I'm going to try to stick it out as best I can, because I've grown this far using this formula, and so far the church live streams have not destroyed the channel. Anyway, long tirade about that, but good to see you, Darren, as always. You are always a great friend of the channel, and I can't wait for your next Submariner video. I don't know when you're going to do it, but I'm so looking forward to it because I love those videos. Piano Dean says, a very rare early rise for me after working Saturday night. Good morning. Good morning, Dean. Good to see you, my friend. And I hope that you had a very profitable Saturday night. Aberjam says, greetings, brother. May Sabu, the Doom Squirrel, never darken your door. I promise, Sabu, the Doom Squirrel, will never darken this door. The singer ain't half bad, though I always felt Gregorian chants are the best at church. Fed, if you like High Holy Church, you're right. The Gregorian chant is probably the most spiritual music form there is. It's beautiful to listen to, and absolutely, and a good Gregorian chant is just incredible. However, we do have an incredibly talented worship pastor, Kyle. That's the person that you see singing in that song. And he is an incredibly talented individual. And for a contemporary church, I think that is some great music. Jeff Franklin says last, but he's not, because Bird of Prey comes in right after him. So Bird of Prey would be more last than you, Jeff, but good to see you. Fed says the bird is in. Valor says, good morning. Viv says, hi, hope you're well. Auntie is cute and sassy. Baby Yoda's adorable. I give up fine. She says, Baby Yoda's cute, then he's cute. And hail Turtistan. Thank you, Valor. And you know what? It's a good idea to give in to the wife on that one, because happy wife, happy life. And, I've used this analogy before, but when people ask about a Christian marriage, and like people try to argue that the wife is supposed to be subservient to the husband because it says, wives obey your husbands. And, well, the problem is that people leave off the rest of it, that husbands are supposed to love their wives as Christ loved the church. What does that mean? Well, Christ got nailed to a frickin' cross because of his love for us, right? So you should love your wife to the point where you would be willing to be nailed to a cross for her. And what that means is that in the battle for the remote control, The husband should have the remote in his hand, but he should always put on what the wife wants to watch. Always. Theory, Burnham is half Q. That actually might make sense. Jitsi is in the house. Good to see you. One of my favorite artists of all time says, hello, Andy Checker and everyone else. Good to see you, Jitsi. Odd Librarian says, joining you from a hotel room. I can now confirm broken water pipes during COVID forcing you and your dog into a hotel is not fun. That sucks. I am so sorry. Cade says, what are your thoughts on televangelists trying to get a private jet? I find televangelism to be at the core hypocritical and an absolute disservice to Christianity as a whole. So I don't like it. I don't think Christianity should not be about making tons of money. It just shouldn't be. But that being said, I don't mind if people want to use modern technology to evangelize. Like, hey, look what I'm doing right this second, right? I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here. I don't have a problem with people using what media they have to get the message out. But when you have televangelists that spend half their time begging for money, and they get millions upon millions of dollars, and they build these, huge multi-million-dollar buildings and studios and stuff, and fly around in private jets and all that, and in the meantime, they're collecting money from people who can barely pay their bills. And that, to me, is sick and wrong. That's one of the things, like if you look at that the video of the music at the beginning of our church, the rundown, dilapidated wall you see behind Kyle while he's singing, that's not a set. That's the building that we are in. We are in a former warehouse, and we have not turned it into this huge monument to God. Instead, we worship in an abandoned warehouse. The only thing they did to it was basically clean the place by, as in like physically clean everything so it's not dirty, put in carpeting and a bunch of chairs. That's pretty much it. And, the building is, I don't remember, like something like 75 years old or something. It's a ridiculously old building, and it shows. But the televangelists making all this money, if you're making that kind of money, like let's say that hypothetically, let's say this channel became a televangelism channel, and I'm getting tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in donations. If I'm flying around in a private jet and it's doing anything other than helping people, there is a massive problem. Now, I wouldn't mind them flying around in a private jet if the purpose of that private jet was to go to places that were suffering and get aid to where it's needed. If they were doing that, I would be okay with it, but that's not what they're doing. They're taking their private jet to fly to an exclusive party in Los Angeles or whatever, and then there's that picture of Jerry Falwell's kid that was on Twitter that's absolutely disgusting, and it's like all this stuff that these people are doing has nothing to do with charity and love and following the tenets of Christ. None of it. Anyway, Fed says, as for the channel killer, I kind of like that you do these streams, yet don't excessively emphasize it elsewhere. You make it accessible. People forget subtlety and restraint these days. Well, thank you. And Bird of Prey puts in a couple of bucks. Thank you so much.
Attorney General of NY announced plans to sue to dissolve the NRA over misused funds. Thoughts?
Well, I hadn't heard about that. If that's true, I don't know. How can... The NRA is a private organization, and so if they collect funds... And this is something that I don't understand. If a private organization collects money and uses it for whatever, unless they're doing something illegal, why does the government have to step in? At all. I mean, I genuinely don't understand. Like, let's say, like, if I'm sitting here on YouTube and I'm begging you for super chats, and I take that super chat money and I use it like I want to, if I ever get enough, there is a printer that I want to get that will absolutely change the way I do 3D printing, but it costs a few $1,000s, so I don't have the money for that. But if I did, and so I got your super chats and I got this printer and I started printing stuff, why would the government have to step in and say, hey, you can't do that, you need to use the money you collect for something else? Why? The government doesn't have the right to tell me how to spend my money. And as far as I know, I don't know, and I genuinely don't know, if the NRA is a 501c3, the only thing they need to show is that they meet the qualifications of being a 501c3. But I don't think the NRA is. Are they? I don't know. Anyway, Kate says, honestly, if Jesus were around today, he probably wouldn't be riding a donkey, but he would be flying in a private, but he wouldn't be flying a private jet either. He would probably be having a used Toyota Camry. Actually, he would be walking most of the time. Keep in mind that he only rode the donkey one time. Most of the time in the New Testament, Jesus got around on foot. Now, he wasn't completely without funds, but he also wasn't particularly rich. But that's also because he wasn't after monetary gain. He was after reaching out to people. And in the modern world, I mean, it's funny because we were actually talked about this a little bit, because in the book of Matthew, we were just reading the story of what Corey calls the weirdest miracle in the Bible, which is where a tax collector challenges Peter about, hey, does Jesus pay his taxes? And Peter says yes. And then Jesus talks to Peter and says, hey, do me a favor. Go to the river over there, throw your fish hook in the water. You're going to catch a fish, and in the fish's mouth is going to be some cash for you to pay our temple tax. And so Peter does that and gets the money and gives it to the temple tax. And Christ even makes a point. This is so that we do not offend others. And Submersible Submariner donated $1.
I had to.
That's okay. I understand. At least it wasn't the other name you used. Which, by the way, Piano Dean, I don't know if you reached out to Darren and told him the story about that name. But Darren, you've got to that one time that we got the super chat from Submersible Honky, you've got to talk to Piano Dean about that. It's hilarious. But anyway, so I think that if Jesus were around today, he'd probably be taking mostly like public transportation and stuff like that. He probably wouldn't own a car at all, because any money that he had, he would use to help people. Thaddeus says, always a pleasure to listen to Church Talk because I believe being honest and understanding each other is what we should be as a species. Also, Lower Decks was quite good. Very good, Thaddeus. Now, I thought Lower Decks was okay. I didn't say it was quite good. I gave it a 6 out of 10. But I was so encouraged by the fact that I actually gained subscribers after posting that review. I was shocked, to be honest. I was expecting to look at my view count, see it drop another 100, but I gained about 50 subs over that review. So, maybe there is hope for humanity. Lucretia says, good morning, Ed Trigger. Why do you think so many people are reacting so adversely to Lower Decks? Many are calling it worse than Picard and Star Trek Discovery. Are they taking it too seriously? Honestly, Lucretia, as far as Lower Decks is concerned, I think that people are invested in ideology. That's all it is. It's the same reason that a Republican cannot say that anything a Democrat wants to do is good. The same reason a Democrat cannot say that anything a Republican wants to do is good. It's the same reason that despite the fact that there's a freaking pandemic going around, Pelosi is trying to blame Trump, Trump is trying to blame Pelosi, and it's ideology. That's all it is there are people that have to say it's bad because they are invested in the idea of selling negativity when it comes to Trek. That's my honest opinion of it. Now, I'm sure that there are some people that honestly hate it because, like with anything, entertainment is subjective. Some people are going to like it. Some people are going to not like it. That's perfectly okay. But if I look at Lower Decks in isolation and I'm just looking at what I see in front of me and I say, does this work? I said, well, it works more than it doesn't. And Mortimus puts in 5. Thank you.
Good Sunday morning. I get here just in time to hear you talk about when Christ was a cowboy. Nice.
I don't remember saying that. But Christ was not he wasn't a showboat. He did a few miracles, but honestly, he was not the showboat that some people think he was. Fed says, which to say, I think a lot of fans these days made the perfect Trek the enemy of the good, as in Lower Decks is at least trying to improve and listen. I agree. I absolutely agree. I think that we want perfect Trek. Obviously, everybody wants that. But we're saying, well, this was just good, so therefore it's horrible because it's not perfect. It's like, I am actually very, very much looking forward to seeing how Strange New Worlds comes out. It looks like it could be a really good show. However, I could be wrong. Night Breeze says, good morning. How you doing, Night Breeze? Robert says, Variant Comics is a great corporate channel. I think they're corporate, reason being they are comic book fans. Well, I'm not saying all corporate channels are bad, but I do not like the fact that all corporate channels get preferential treatment from YouTube. I think that's unfair. And because it is the independent content creator that built this platform. Christopher says, as the apostles to say, greetings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Good morning, Christopher. Richie says, your channel will grow much faster if you finish your review of The Incredible Hulk. I am going to be doing that soon, so that is on the horizon, like the sunrise there. That is part of what's coming. Herbsta says, you're a very good YouTuber and tracker. It's hard to make it anywhere in the world financially by being a hardworking and honest person. Scammers and liars and thieves get most of the money. That's actually kind of true. And you know what? If I have to just get by, but maintain my integrity, I'm okay with that. If I can get ahead of the game, so much the better. But I'm not sitting here to get rich. I love hanging out with you guys, so I do enjoy doing this kind of stuff, but I'm honestly just trying to make sure that I keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. You know, as long as I'm at that point, I'm not going to complain about it. Sure, I would love to travel the world and meet you guys and do stuff like that, and I would love it if I could afford to get all the 3D printers in the world to send you guys cool stuff like the super secret project that me and Matthew are working on. But if I never get to that point, I never get to that point, and I'm okay. That's, but it's okay to dream as long as we don't idolatry, however you say it, make an idol out of your dreams. Tressa says, good morning all. Very glad to be here on Church Stream. Always a great way to start Sunday. Thank you, Tressa. I truly appreciate that. I know I'm falling behind. I'm just going to read the stuff addressed to me. Richie says, your old warehouse look is in these days. Yeah, but we were doing that before it was cool. The church has been going at that building for about a decade now. Darren says, watch the video by internet historian about Harold Camping, a ministry leader who convinced a lot of people that the rapture would take place in 2011 and it ruin their lives. Yeah, these false prophets they're all over the place. And if you have a pastor, a priest, a rabbi, or whatever trying to tell you this is the day that the world will end, try to remember that the Bible itself says no one will know. So if they're saying they do know, that's in a direct conflict with the Bible, and if they're teaching something that's a direct conflict of the Bible, assuming they're Christians, then there's a big problem. I do believe, though, that church should have a cross placed somewhere in the place of honor, but not a crucifix. I find those a bit much. One need not beat adherents over the head. Well, and I kind of agree. I do think that crosses are a great symbol of Christ himself. And you can't see it in the music video that I put up, but we actually do have like a life-size cross in one section in the main sanctuary, and it is a truly life-size cross. It doesn't have a statue of Jesus hanging there and bleeding and everything. And I understand, hey, it's Catholic tradition, the crucifix. That's fine. We're not Catholic. But, in the cross, we do have the nails in there and all that, and the crown of thorns is sitting on the top of the cross, but, it's just showing the cross, not the suffering on the cross. And part of that, honestly, Fed, is because too many people focus on the suffering and not the redemption that comes afterwards. Like Passion of the Christ was a great, great depiction of crucifixion. But there's only like 10 seconds of resurrection in the movie. Sorry. Greg says, last week you gave several religious examples of TOS. I can't think of many, if at all, in TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise. Can you? Well, in Enterprise, they kind of avoided the subject. In Voyager, most of the religious stuff they dealt with was centered around Chakotay and basically validating his spirit walking and spirit animals and stuff like that. That's all in Voyager. In fact, Janeway meets her spirit animal in the show. There's also, I can't remember the name of the episode, but the one where Janeway has to prove herself to rescue someone, and I'm trying to remember, and that one had kind of a little bit of a religious angle. Deep Space Nine was probably the most religious Trek series at all, since the Bajoran faith was front and center throughout the entire run. That being said, they didn't get into monotheism in Deep Space Nine. It was always just about the prophets and all that. TNG, they deliberately tried to either avoid religion or bash it, and that was because TNG was the closest thing to Gene Roddenberry's vision. Oh man, I'm sorry, my sinuses are still driving me crazy. All right, Robert says, the scripture also says in the church females are to wear a head covering and the males are not supposed to wear any kind of head covering. That is true, but you also have to look at the context of that book. What Paul was writing about was a very specific church in which women were basically showing up at church dressed like whores. And I'm not going to mince words there. Women were showing up in church dressed like whores, trying to sell themselves. And so for that church, he said, you know what? Make the women cover themselves up. Men, you shouldn't. And because the men weren't coming to church dressed like whores. But does that mean that all churches, women should cover their heads and men shouldn't? There are some people that do believe that. That's why in some evangelical churches, women always wear hats, because it says for women to wear a head covering. But you know what they do? They're actually turning that into a form of idolatry, because what they do is they get these big fancy hats with all sorts of decorations and flowers and birds and crap like that all over this hat. It's not about trying to show off what a great hat you have. The idea, what Paul was trying to say, is that you come to church not to adorn yourself, but to worship Christ. And that's not what was going on. Anyway, the complaint details a lot of illegal activity allegedly committed by the NRA. Well, if the NRA violates the law, like anybody else, they should pay the price for it. Period. All right, and I say that of anybody. If you violate the laws of the country that you are in, then you need to face the repercussions of said violations. I don't know what the actual alleged things that the NRA did are. I'm not a member of the NRA. No dog in the fight. But if the NRA did do something illegal, then they should be, basically fined at the very least. And even like if they have local chapters or whatever that are directly responsible for things, those people that made those decisions should probably get some jail time. The NRA leaders were using millions of dollars for personal vacations. Get real. If that's all they're being accused of, as just using money for personal vacations, it's and by the way, I heard you said embezzling money is illegal. That's true, but embezzlement is different than benefits. I don't know what they did, but let's say if they were sneaking money off the books into their personal pockets, that's embezzlement. If they were simply, the company was paying for them to all go to Tahiti for 6 months, that's a benefit. But I don't know. Darren says, if you had a private jet, you would call it Turkestan 1 or Shuttlecraft Galileo. I'd probably call it Shuttlecraft Galileo. I'd probably paint it up to look like the Shuttlecraft. We have proof that Anti-Checker hates TOS, so it won't be Shuttlecraft Galileo. Well, you're wrong about that. Richie says, you probably lose most of the 50 subs once they realize that you don't hate lower decks. Hate sells. You know, you're right that hate sells, but I got the subs immediately after releasing that video. So I think it was actually some people that were shocked that not everybody hated it. Because quite frankly, I think that this is going to hurt the Fandom Menace eventually. Because sooner or later, people are going to realize that they're just hating to hate. Now, not all of them do. I mean, some are giving their genuine opinions on it, and some just happen to hate everything. But eventually, it's going to bite you in the behind if all you can do is hate, and you can't even appreciate the good things that are coming out of these studios. Sooner or later, people are going to catch on that it's all an act. All right, there's no such thing as perfect. If you're looking for perfect, you will always be disappointed. That's true. And you know what? Honestly, the funny thing is that outside of God himself, yeah, there is no perfection, and anybody and anything that you put your faith in will let you down, except for God himself. Why is life a game? Well, because Parker Brothers, or was it Milton Bradley, made a game. I don't know. Nightbreeze says, you might gain a few subs if you when you finish the Airwolf Super Chat. That's true, I might. Christopher says, I don't know if you follow Triangulum Studios. I do not, but they waited on the old new Trek debate and was wondering if you'd seen it. I have not. So I don't know what their thought is on it. I think that old Trek is better than new Trek, but I would rather have new Trek than no Trek. At least from what we've gotten from, I will tell you this. Season 2 of Discovery, Picard, and Lower Decks. If I look at those three things on the whole, I'd rather have them than not have them, because Season 2 of Discovery, while it did have the horrific character of Michael Burnham in it, it also introduced us to an interesting angle on Spock. I like Christopher Pike, all that. Notice I'm leaving out the short treks, because the short treks, in large part, were insulting. And unfortunately, Season 2 of Trek ended with one of the worst episodes ever, but let's not forget Shades of Grey from TNG. Ending a season on a really bad note is nothing new to Star Trek. In fact, even ending the series on a bad note is not necessarily anything new to Star Trek. The alternative was the alternate. No, it was. Oh gosh, no, I'm forgetting the name of the episode. I can't believe this. I'm spacing. I can see it. The one, Dr. Janice Lester. She was switching bodies with Kirk, and William Shatner was chewing the scenery, pretending to be a woman. But now I'm spacing it. But yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. Fed says, ironically, Lower Decks is kind of demonstrates slightly demonstrates that religion is a thing in TNG. They had turban Sikh in the background when the shuttle carrying Tindy lands. Thus, why not Christians? That's kind of true. I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. The Voyager episode you're thinking of is Sacred Ground, where Janeway had to go on a spiritual journey to save Kes. Thank you. I could not remember. Man, I'm old. Is it Turnabout Intruder? No, Intruder About Turns. Turnabout Intruder was... Yeah, that is it. Okay, yeah, that's the one. Viv says she neither likes nor dislikes Lower Decks or LDS. It's yeah, that's right, because that's what they're calling it. It's okay, and no reason to hate it. If you don't like it, that doesn't mean others do hate it and should not be attacked for liking it. Agreed. Dean Rogers says, sorry I missed this update, but how's your back doing after the procedure? Much, much better. Not quite 100%. I still, when I wake up, I'm still a little stiff in the lower back area a lot, but my goodness, 1,000 times better than I was a couple of weeks ago. And so I've even done a little bit of work around here. I haven't finished, and I still got a lot to do. But I'm getting the anti-layer organized. As long as I am relatively pain-free, I'm going to do as much work as I can. And Indy Tiger puts in $5. Thank you.
Turnabout Intruder. What a way to go out.
Indeed. And so, yeah, that was a bad episode. Although I got to say, it's one of those bad episodes that can be fun to watch, because watching William Shatner pretend to be Janice Lester is freaking hilarious. I mean, when he's sitting there talking to Spock, he's got a nail file. He's like, yes. And it was just so freaking funny. So let's see. Bird says, anyone in the NRA breaking the law should be investigated and tried if necessary. But you don't dissolve the organization of thousands because of a bad leader. You didn't dissolve Chicago. Yeah, I would agree with that, Bird. And so I don't know about dissolving the NRA. Seems a bit crazy if there's a few people that were doing things that are inappropriate. Those people should be kicked out and probably brought up on charges, like you said. The NRA was soliciting for funds to support the organization and use funds for personal benefits, then it's fraud. Depends on how it's put, Sean. Because, for example, if I say, hey, guys, I really hope I can raise enough money to get a 3D printer. And then this month, on the 21st, when I get paid, I use that money to pay the mortgage. Does that mean I'm committing fraud? No, I'm saying I want to get to that point, but I'm not there yet. Right now, I'm just barely squeezing by. But, I don't know the details of it. I'm not going to defend or condemn the NRA based on what I hear in chat on a YouTube stream. No offense to you guys. Since I don't know. All right, so where was I? Fed says, as I said before, having watched the reviews, Mecha, Midnight's Edge, I don't get why they're so obstinate. Thus, I take the view that they're simply Trek. I take the view that they're simply Trek fans. We never agree on anything. Well, and that's the thing. If Mecha, Midnight's Edge, Nerdrotic, Doomcock, if they hate the show, that's perfectly fine. I don't have a problem with it. However, if everybody in the Fandom Menace hates everything that they produce, there's something wrong. If there's no dissenting voice in the Fandom Menace, there's definitely something wrong. And that's a problem that we tend to do. The Phantom Menace does this. The SJW cliques do this. All these different groups do this, where if somebody disagrees on something, they are ostracized. And I'll give you a great example. Atheism, right? And don't get me wrong. I know atheism is not a religion, right? But atheists tend to band together on YouTube and have these things. But then, one day, one atheist says, whoa, wait a minute. I have a problem with, say, this hardcore feminist agenda. And all of a sudden other atheists are like, get back, spawn of Satan, because all of a sudden they're horrible because they disagree on something. And Jonas B donated €2 with no comment, but thank you, there's probably a super sticker, I'll see it in a minute, but thank you so much, Jonas. I truly appreciate it, my friend. Herbs says, I agree about the Phantom Menace. You can only give the same negative review of everything so many times before it becomes unwatchable. Yeah, it's going to, sooner or later, it's going to bite them in the behinds. And, that's why, I may grow slowly, but at least the people that watch my channel are not, they know me, they know what to expect, and, if I give my honest opinion. Fed says, as for Gen 3 Trek, why not look at it as a benefit, showing people that you can do Trek in many ways, but there's definitely definitive and objectively bad ways of doing it, thus we learn. Yeah, and you know what? If you look at Season 1 of Discovery and Season 2 of Discovery, I would dare say that Season 2 is as much better than Season 1 as Season 2 of TNG was better than Season 1 of TNG. And so it is entirely possible that Season 3 we get some good stories. It's entirely possible that Discovery could go on to run for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and actually be an awesome show. So I think it's completely unfair to just say that, everything Discovery sucks. Yes, the design of the ship is kind of lame. But you know what? You can fix that. It's a really easy fix. You say the Discovery goes in for a refit. Or at the end of a season, Discovery is destroyed and then they get a new ship and name it Discovery. Granted, I think that the time travel thing at the end of Season 2 was stupid, but we'll see what they do with it. And Darren says, leave Shades of Grey alone. That season came out during a frickin' writer's strike. All things considered, Season 2 was incredible. I disagree. Don't get me wrong, writer's strike or no, the quality of the show was crap. All right, Shades of Grey was a horrible show. It does not matter that there was a writer's strike. I get tired of people making excuses for bad stuff. For example, Darren, Star Trek V, horrible movie, right? And people will argue, well, wait a minute. Lucasfilm was supposed to do the visual, or ILM was supposed to do the visual effects, but they got double booked, so they had to take a alternative. And, they really wanted to do stuff like this, but they just couldn't do it with the budget that they had. And they really does not matter. It was a crap movie. You can make all the excuses in the world about it, but it was still a crap movie. And Shades of Grey happening to happen during a writer's strike just means that they got lazy and slapped something together so that they would have something. But how about this? How about you end the season on the episode before rather than throw together a really badly done clip show? And Season 2 was much better than Season 1. But I still think it was crap. Monty Spatchcock says, hail, good sir. Hail to you, Monty. The Fed says, that's something that annoys me. We're geeks of science fiction. Technically speaking, we should be smarter than SJWs. Yet, why does the Phantom Menace forget and go sheep? because it's human nature. Humans, it seems, are a social herd type animal. We tend to look for strong, charismatic leaders, and we follow that person, and we conform to a social construct. That social construct may be a love of guns in the NRA. It could be a love of Star Trek in the Trekkie community. It could be a love of Star Wars or just science fiction in general. It could be, however, and this happens far too often, a negative. For example, if you hate Democrats, then you hang out with the Republicans. If you hate Republicans, you hang out with the Democrats. And all these Democrats are hanging around talking about how horrible the Republicans are, and all the Republicans are over here talking about how horrible the Democrats are, and the hate intensifies and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we start talking about hanging Chads, and he stole the election, and and then we have impeachment hearings over a blowjob. And I know is because he lied under oath, but you get the idea. So it's. I think that it is kind of human nature. What if China, Japan, Mongolia, North Korea, South Korea, and Taiwan started an alliance? Well, then I guess they'd call it the Asian Alliance. Shades of Grey does shed a light on how little Picard means to the show. Riker is the guy in all the clips. Well, that's because it's done in Riker's head, though, so of course he's in all the clips. Shades of Grey was a Riker episode. It just wasn't a good one. If you want a good Riker episode, you watch Best of Both Worlds Part 1. That was Riker's shining moment. And you know what? Picard in the first couple of seasons was just annoying. He didn't get good until he got assimilated. Fed says, I know the answer. People are generally stupid, but I live to some degree of hope, lest I go mad given the state of the place. Well, it's funny because, I told this to Darren the other day, 100 is the average IQ, which means half of people have an IQ under 100. And Herbsta throws in a couple of bucks. Thank you so much. And there it is.
Groupthink and dogma can corrupt any subculture.
That is 100% true. And in fact, what happened to my background? It just disappeared. Oh, is it going to restart? It should restart. If it doesn't, then that was really weird. It's like all of a sudden we have a total eclipse. Hey, I see something. I see some sparklies. Okay, yes, it's restarting. That's just the logo for the people that made this video. All right, so, wow, that was just weird. There we go. We're pre-sunrise again. You're absolutely right. Groupthink and dogma are horrible. And in fact, dogma is what is, it's funny because dogma is actually a religious term. And what dogma really means is an idea that is non-negotiable, right? That this is absolute fact and we're not going to argue about it. Now, dogma on certain things is perfectly fine. For example, if I dogmatically insist that this is a glass, that's fine, right? If I dogmatically insist that this is a 3D printed model of a weighted companion cube, yeah, no problem, because it is. That's fact. There is no denying that. But if I start talking about dogma like liberals hate America, or dogma like conservatives are homophobes, right? That's dangerous. And that is wrong. Anyway, dogma is horrible. Dogma is okay when dealing with absolute fact, but it is horrible when dealing with people. Because no group of people is 100% monolithic, and yet when you have groups that become monolithic, it usually becomes very, very bad. And Indy Tiger and Arabic throwing super chats. Thank you so much. I do appreciate both of you. I will wait for it to come around here in just a second. Cade says, I think Trump secretly made the 2016 Ghostbusters film. I doubt that, but that would be funny.
I got him!
Where do you think Trek movies are going? Stuck?
And there's Indies.
I got
Warp core went out. Call Scotty.
Indeed. Call Scotty when the warp core is out, because he will grab a wrench and fix it. He doesn't tell the computer to run a diagnostic. However, and by the way, that's actually a funny bit in Lower Decks that I thought was hilarious, and I'm sure went right over a lot of people's heads, is that when Rutherford was upset over the door not working, and then he says, how can we sit there and think about going on a date when there's a level 3 diagnostic just waiting to be run? And I just had to bust out laughing, because how many times does something break and Geordi says, computer, run a level 3 diagnostic? You know, that was hilarious to me. I did like that they poked fun at things within Trek. Now, as far as the movie side of things, Arabic, I think that right now, Star Trek films are dead. Absolutely dead. And I'm okay with that, by the way. I think that they should wait. They should not do any Star Trek films until they have a strong Star Trek brand again. And Star Trek does better on the small screen. Star Trek should not be a film franchise. It should be a series of shows, but not 13-episode mega movie series. I'm talking about a real season, 20-odd episodes, episodic, exploring the human condition. Once they get back to that, Star Trek could, in fact, be great again. But right now, I don't even want to think about a Star Trek film, because I don't care. You know, they could talk about trying to do a Discovery movie. Nobody's going to go see it. I mean, yeah, you'll get maybe a few million out of it, but you're not going to make your budget back on it. So Fed says, speaking as an Aussie who grew up in a labor family and now feels himself more comfortable in the Liberal Party, I'd rather drink with your Republicans over Democrats any day. Well, you know, like I said, I understand people lean left or lean right as far as the political spectrum. And that might make them more attracted to the Democrats or the Republicans. The problem is not when people think, oh, I like the ideas that this Democrat has, or I like the ideas that this Republican has. The first election I ever voted in, I voted for Michael Dukakis, Democrat. And I was voting because he wanted to do free college, and I couldn't afford to go to college. He didn't win, obviously. But nowadays, I tend to vote independent, because I just can't hold my nose and vote for a Republican or a Democrat right now. None of them. You know what I hear from Republicans? Democrats are bad. You know what I hear from Democrats? Republicans are bad. Not, hey, here's my ideas. Hey, not, here's how we can make America better. Instead, it's like, oh, those Republicans, we've got to, you know, every time I see a Biden ad, he says, we've got to defeat Trump. Not talking about, hey, here's what we need to do. What if we hated both parties? Well, then you'd be like me. Captain Trek says, hello, how you doing, Captain Trek? Good to see you, my friend. Thaddeus says, do you have any news on your resin ship for your 3D printed? I'm still working on. I obviously I printed a few, but the problem is that the warp nacelles fall apart, and so in shipping they're not quite durable enough. So I'm still working on redesigning it. Plus the super duper secret project, which I tell you guys, when you see it, you will flip your lids. I mean, it's the prototype is sitting right next to me, and it's basically about the same size as the final one will be. But I can't. But it's got a few problems with it that I've ironed out in the 3D modeling process. Yeah, it's wow, freaking crazy. I want to reveal it soon, but I want to wait until I see how Matthew is doing on the electronic side of things. Thus I say we use the brains for the good Lord gave us, and think as individuals merely influenced by our group someone. One can pray. I hope that happens one day, but right now it's all group think and herds. Where can I send you links to cool videos? Since you're getting into, I assume that's not piloting, but printing stuff, I thought I should show you some, piloting stuff. Okay, you did mean piloting. I should show you some dogfight videos from Star Wars flight sim games and a flight sim channel. Well, you can send it to me on Twitter, or you can send it to me on Discord. The Discord I'm honestly horrible about getting to. But I will say this, is that I'm probably, when I have a little bit of extra cash, hopefully by the end of the month, I'm going to probably get Elite Dangerous, just looking at stuff. It looks like a good game to get into, and you can set up private servers on it, and that would be fun to be able to challenge the filthy Kurogans to a battle. And so that's probably going to be the one I go with. Herb says, I agree, I'm an agnostic and relatively non-religious, but religion is not the problem. Enforced arbitrary dogma is the problem. Indeed. If Christians actually followed what the Bible said, nobody would ever have problems with Christians. That's the sad state of things. Cade says could they do a redemption arc for Lorca, and how could they ruin him further? They should, if they bring back the Prime Lorca, since we don't know that Prime Lorca is dead, only that Mirror Lorca is dead. I think that he could be an excellent captain character for Discovery moving forward. Lorca was a great character. And you make, just like with everything in the Mirror Universe, the core of the character is the same, where Lorca is a strategist. He's and he's someone that will basically follow Starfleet protocol, and do anything he can to fulfill his duty. But he also will do anything necessary. He doesn't let personal moral convictions get in the way of his doing his duty, but I think he's a really interesting character. How could they ruin him further? Well, they could always turn him. They could really go say that he's the opposite of his mirror counterpart, make him an ineffectual leader and a soy boy. As for Lower Decks, the Batless scene ironically kind of proves Shadversity, fellow countryman YouTuber, though Victorian, so ick, claim that it's more axe than sword. The Batleth is kind of an interesting weapon. It's not honestly that practical, because if I had a katana, I could easily outmaneuver someone with a Batleth. It really would not be that hard. Herb says the entire movie industry is dead for now. That's true, but when movies pick back up, I do think that we're going to see a shift in the near future, but we're going to see more and more stuff, as we are seeing, coming out for streaming services. Hulu original, Amazon Prime original, Netflix originals, right? All these things are actually becoming more and more popular and much better production value than what you're seeing on ABC, CBS, NBC, which is so funny because the big networks are falling behind the streaming services in terms of quality programming. And it's not about people dropping the F-bomb or showing boobs in their shows. Yes, some people do this. They think that that's what the audience wants, but what the audience wants is good stories, interesting characters. Yes, some people get a thrill out of seeing a boob on screen, but at the same time, that's not going to sustain a show. And so I do think that the streaming services are going to dominate media in the not too distant future. They already are right now, out of necessity, but I think that they're going to continue to dominate if they start putting out stuff like they are that is better caliber programming than what the major television channels and even the major studios are releasing in film. If people want proof or evidence of the existence of God, perhaps take us winning the revolution, because the reality of it, by statistics, everything else we would have had our butts. Well, people don't, but you see, here's the thing, people don't say, oh, that was just coincidence. I mean, the funny thing is, two people can look at the same thing. One sees God, the other sees, absence of God. And, look at the sunrise here, right? Some people see the beautiful light reflecting off the cloud, or refracting through the clouds and reflecting off the clouds, and the beautiful collage of colors here, and say, how can you not believe in God? And then some people will look at the light refracting through the clouds and the clouds themselves and say, how can you possibly believe God is behind this? Because obviously it's because of the nuclear fusion that's taking place on the sun and the type of atmosphere we have and water vapor and blah, blah, blah. And so two people look at it, see two different things. That's just the way people are. Though I do feel like we should have had cut off more given that logic. Yeah, she should have cut right through his leg, although maybe it was a dull blade, or maybe she's just not that physically strong. Piandi says, we should debut the Super Chat. I commissioned Joshua to make one of these church live streams when it's ready. It's almost ready, actually. The animation part is done. I got to get the sound done for it. That's the only delay right now. But yeah, maybe we'll get that going this week. Christopher says, I believe it's been the way in politics this country for a long time. Look how ugly the election of 1800 was. Thomas Jefferson was portrayed as anti-American. Well, during an election, you always try to portray the other guy as worse than you. But, and yes, there was some of that all the way back to the beginning where people would always say bad things about the other guy. But at the same time, people don't even know what the Democrats or the Republicans stand for these days, except that, the Democrats like gays, I guess, and the Republicans, like business, I guess. That's kind of what people think. Trust me, Shadversity absolutely tore the bat list to so many pieces. I would be not unlike the legendary hair of Kalis and his remnant shards. That's good, because the bat list is a horribly designed weapon. It's cool looking, but it's horribly designed. Lance says, I have to disagree. I run into atheists, or what happens to be true militant Satanists that hate Christianity because of what is in the Bible, especially the Old Testament and Revelations. Well, but here's the problem with that, Lancer, is that if you want to pick apart Christianity based on what you read in the Old Testament and Revelations, you're skipping the core message. So, that would be like saying America's horrible because slavery is legal and booze is banned. You could absolutely say that by just looking at the Constitution. Slavery is legal. In fact, a black person is only 3/5 of a person, according to the Constitution. And alcohol, by the way, is illegal. Right? What a horrible country. It's called cherry picking. And atheists do it, and so do Christians. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying one side does it and the other doesn't. Right? But when you look at the Old Testament and you cherry pick out the worst of the worst things you can find, a lot of the times what they'll say is, look at Lot and his daughters. See, the Bible endorses incest. Okay, then you didn't read the story then. Because what the daughters did was clearly wrong, and it was simply stating what happened. It wasn't endorsing it. Well, the Bible says that you should stone your children to death. Then you don't understand how the Levitican law actually works, and you don't understand where the term scapegoat comes from, because that's part of it. But then you skip over all the stuff about loving your fellow man and not being judgmental and being a positive influence on the world. You skip all that and then skip right to God's wrath poured out onto the world. And so you just basically skip all the good stuff and focus in on the negative. And it's funny, because this is actually true. Last night in Corey's message, he talked about this a little bit. So we focus on the negative. We always see the negative. Right? When we think of Jesus, a lot of people just picture him strung up on the cross and being tortured. They don't think about his caring for people, his loving people, his forgiveness, his kindness, his gentleness, and his teachings. We just see a guy who was tortured and brutally executed. And, isn't that nice that he did that for us? Anyway. And Tim says, I disagree. If Christians follow the word, I think there would still be people out there taking the Bible out of context and twist what the Bible says. Lots of proof out there for that. Well, no, but you see, if Christians actually followed what the Bible said, then people wouldn't have a problem with Christians. They might cherry pick things out of the Bible and say the Bible is bad, but there would be no, if Christians were out there doing nothing but loving people, never being offensive, just trying to help their neighbors and stuff like that. If that's what Christians were doing, nobody would have a problem with that. Unless they're insane. Do you think Discovery could use time travel element to fix canon? Yes. And in fact, I've said it a few times before, but I think what they should do is actually, and this would be a nice way to tie into all of Trek, you bring in, since they are in the distant future, you bring in the temporal Cold War. And you find out that one of the factions in the temporal Cold War happens to be in the time that Discovery ends up at. And as the season progresses, you have them trying to get to the person who is behind the temporal Cold War. And then you have some big shocker, like who the person behind it is, like say it's actually Michael Burnham, or hey, maybe it's Lorca, or hey, maybe it's, just, put some kind of surprise there. You could even do it like, hey, it's Jonathan Archer or whatever. However you do it, you have that person behind the temporal Cold War. They finally get stopped. Or if it's a hero character like Jonathan Archer, let's say that they have to save him and prevent him from being killed or something. And then the timeline resets, and the last shot of the season is Discovery with round, proper nacelles with the white paint scheme. The interiors of the ship actually look like classic Trek, and we're like, oh, they fixed the timeline. Saw Uncle Joe's ad last night to announce that he will be announcing his running mate soon, and it'll be a great ad tracker, meaning that Uncle Joe wants us to know that she will be a she. Oh, yeah, of course. And that's the sad thing, is that if you are actually picking a running mate based on gender, based on skin color and all that, which if I were a betting man, I would say that Uncle Joe's running mate is going to be a female of color, right? That if I were a betting man, that's what I would think. And he's only doing that so that he can virtue signal that he cares, when the truth is he doesn't give a crap. He's just doing it to get elected. Christopher says, I thought the bat list was more ceremonial and a status symbol, much like how Japanese officers and not enlisted would carry a blade. Not practical, but showed who was an officer. Except that we see the Klingons use bat lists in combat. That's how they prefer to fight. Like when on the siege of Deep Space Nine, when the Klingons were briefly enemies of the Federation, the Klingons were using batliths because they prefer hand-to-hand combat. Fed says, this is why I prefer our system. You Yanks love your excessive pomp and circumstance in your politics, though granted, ours is still pretty bad, but dull. Dull is good. Yeah, dull in politics is good. Do you think that an actual real-life libertarians would rally behind a Ferengi? As far as the Ferengi concept of things, would libertarians like the Ferengi? I would say the Republicans would probably like the Ferengi more than libertarians, because but I do think that the libertarians would go with a Ferengi over a Democrat. Monty says the problem with Lower Decks is its background TV. It's something you can drop in and out of without losing anything, so far at least. And for Trek, that's kind of sad. I'm not sure. Problem with Lower Decks is its background TV. Oh, I see what you're saying. That it's something you put on in the background that you don't really pay attention to. Maybe so, but that's you could say that of a lot of things. But to me, if for Lower Decks, I mean, I'm just watching it and judging it for what it is. When you say it's background TV, maybe it is for you, but I actually watched it. Plot Shift says, I think the problem with Democrats, there are too many chefs in the kitchen arguing about what to cook, whereas the Republicans have one chef, Trump, and they'll like whatever he makes. Not necessarily. There are Republicans that don't particularly care for Trump. And the funny thing about Trump is that he's not really a Republican, but that's a whole other discussion. Or perhaps how the way the Bible is seen these days is the same reason why clickbait and negativity sells. A man wants to see the devil, he will see the devil all around him. That's kind of true. And it's like when it's like when you talk about, say, homosexuality, right? That's a big hot topic when it comes to the Bible. Oh no, I just got the stream demonetized because I dared to mention it. And people say, oh, the Bible is homophobic. Well, homophobia is would be defined as a irrational fear of or hatred of homosexuals, right? That's what homophobia means. Now, to disagree is not irrational. To hate, sure. And that's the problem, is that what many Christians do is they'll say, oh, well, this is categorized as a sin, and therefore I hate people that do it. Then you've got the wrong attitude. So, yeah. Atheism and theism are equally unprovable. That's true. That doesn't mean one shouldn't believe in either, but they should acknowledge their views are not provable in the scientific sense of the word. That's absolutely true. The problem is that like theists that are open-minded like myself have no problem with that, right? I don't have any problem with saying, hey, you know what? I cannot prove to you that God exists. I can't do it, and I'm not going to try. The problem is that what atheists tend to counter-argue is that, well, since you can't prove God exists, I'm right. And it's like, okay, whatever, dude. The Fed says, I don't know, Andrea, the suggestion of yours would fix discovery, but it would just come off as random cleverness to fit a convoluted and still bad story. It wouldn't receive well. I think, but you see, but the thing is, Fed, is that you go beyond that. That's just how you end season 3. Then season 4, you actually have discovery in the proper TOS era. And now you could actually do something interesting with it. Okay, and in fact, what if there are certain people that maintain their memory of the alternate timeline, and or something like that? So, but actually, what would be better is that then in the new timeline of Discovery, you're basically doing a reboot of the show. You can fix things like no longer have Michael Burnham being a Mary Sue. Kate says, you should never mention a Discovery era. There is no Discovery era. There never was, and there never will be. Now, you should not bury your head in the sand, Cade. Not going to fix it. There is nothing that could objectively prove or disprove the existence of God. Therefore, it would remain an open question that should be debated and discussed. I have no problem with discussing it. And the problem is that I also insist, and this is where I get into fights with people sometimes, I insist on basically discussing it from a common ground. And then we're going to say, okay, look, if you want to argue against theism, right, we're going to have a debate about it, right? And so if you want to argue against theism, that's perfectly fine. But don't make your entire argument that you have to prove your argument, because that's cowardice. I understand that you're going to say, and I'm not saying you, but I'm saying, this happens a lot in these debates. You're going to say, I'm an agnostic atheist. So I'm not saying God can't exist. I'm just saying that it hasn't been proven that he does. Okay, then leave, please. You have nothing to argue with me. If you want, and I understand that you're not being a dogmatic fool about it. I'm not either. I fully admit that I could be wrong about this. But you take your position and argue for it. Don't just say, well, until you prove your position to me, I win. That's not a debate. That's being a child. Meta sim for your soul. Wow, that's a weird one. Enter Wesley Crusher. He's behind everything in the temporal Cold War. That would actually be interesting if you Will Wheaton, he'd do it. How can time travel fix the timeline if anything is possible? Discovery becomes TOS part because of time travel. There is still a timeline where it's not. Well, but we don't have to explore that timeline any further. And it's just like you could argue, all the alternate timelines that ever existed in Trek still exist. Like, what about the timeline where the Borg wipe out the Federation? Oh, no, it's horrible because there's a timeline where the Borg wiped out the Federation. No, because that's not the timeline that the stories take place in. Indy says, I vote for Trip Tucker as the man behind the temporal Cold War. His character needs saving from the series finale of Enterprise. That wouldn't be bad. Even Ferengi are better than your parties. For all your traditions towards women, at least sons were expected to give a stipend to their mother and care for them. Well, are you saying that we're anti-woman? Because I don't think that's the case. Let's see. Herbst says, well, 45-year-old white dude presidents and vice presidents plus one Obama. I don't think it's bad to give different type of American a chance at the big job. Here's the thing, Herbsta. I'm not saying that a woman shouldn't be president. I'm not saying that a person of whatever racial group shouldn't be president. I don't care what the gender or the race of the president is. It is irrelevant. However, what I am saying is that if Joe Biden picks a running mate simply based on gender and race, that is every bit as racist as if someone picks a white dude for the same reason. The only reason he's doing it is to tell everybody, look how much I care, when he doesn't. LD says, Star Trek Lower Decks, California class ship, just like California rolls sushi, not a real sushi, and more for newbies. Interesting coincidence. Is that what they're saying now? It's a California class? Which is kind of funny. That would make sense because the ship's called the Cerritos. Would that mean that all ships of that class are named after cities in California? So the USS San Francisco, USS Los Angeles, USS Santa Rosa, USS Santa Clara, that could actually be interesting. And by the way, good to see you, Andre. Hello from Bosnia. Good to see you, my friend. Lancer says, if ships did cut and run from the Battle of Wolf 359, could all the crews from those ships be treated? I assume you mean like tried or something like that. Yes, that would be dereliction of duty, actually, and you could also do it as desertion. People were offended by Jesus, who embodied the character of God perfectly. People will be offended regardless, and the Apostle Paul stated it's an offense and a stumbling block. Well, actually, one thing that Paul said, though, is that we should not be a stumbling block, and that's kind of the problem, is that the problem that we run into is that Christians get so angry at people and point the finger and say, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, then that becomes a stumbling block to that person listening to what the real message of Christ is. And the real message of Christ isn't about your sexual preference. The real message of Christ is not about your gender. It's not about your race. It's not about any of those superficial things. And in fact, the Bible specifically speaks against that type of thinking. But, unfortunately, we're so busy pointing out how horrible people are that we forget that those people are a reflection of God. Valor says, or a transgender gay person of color in a wheelchair will be his VP. It checks all the... That would be hilarious. Sebek and Tarak were behind the Cold War. They could do that, but nobody would know except for the people in this chat what the heck that was about. And Richie says, Biden needs to choose someone capable of assuming the presidency, a real possibility, to be honest, given his age. Newsflash, there are women of color qualified for the job. Well, yeah, but you know what? I don't think you pick the person based on their gender or their race. You pick the person based on their qualifications. End of discussion. If you have 10 people, let's say you narrow down the field to 10 people, and 3 of them are white dudes, couple are black guys, couple of black women, couple of, whatever, just mix it up, right? Then you look at their resumes, and you have to say which one of these people would be the best choice for running the country if I died. And that's the person you pick. Not which is the person that's going to get me votes. And that's how they pick them. I mean, you don't really think that Sarah Palin was picked as VP because of her incredible qualifications. Only alcohol is proofable. That's interesting way of putting it. Sean says, atheism does not need proof. Religions need proof because they're just fiction. See, and that's the type of argumentation, Sean, that I reject out of hand. Because, you're saying, I don't need to prove anything, you do. Neener, neener, nee, I win. You know what? Have fun with that, Sean. I love you, Sean, but at the same time, if that's your argumentation, take it somewhere else, because I will not respond to that type of argumentation other than to say I will not respond to that type of argumentation. Herbst says, I agree that that is why I'm not an atheist. I know a little about the Bible. For whatever reason, I simply wasn't blessed with religious faith, but I have plenty of hope and love. And you know what, Herbst? Here's the thing. And this is something I truly believe in. The Bible says this flat out. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. I agree with that statement. You know what it doesn't say? Seek and you'll find it before next Tuesday. Knock and the door will be open by the end of the day. And so if you are an atheist or agnostic and you are genuinely seeking the truth with an open mind and an open heart, and you're not saying that's wrong, instead you're saying what's right, and you continue that attitude, eventually you will find it. It may not be until your deathbed, but you will find it. So I truly believe that with all my heart. The problem is that people don't even understand what it means to be open-minded anymore. To them, open-minded means you agree with me, right? Open-minded means you automatically assume my agenda. People, and that's almost a calling card of the American Democratic Party. You have to, be open-minded. That means you're a Democrat, because Republicans aren't. Chris says, one can't prove God doesn't exist. Belief that he doesn't come down to faith, and that's something an atheist doesn't want to hear. Yes, they have faith in science. One thing that ticks, and it says one of two, but I don't know where two of two is. There it is. Or in their own rationality and ability, but it goes further. They claim that God doesn't exist, and they would have to have a godlike abilities to actually prove it. Well, the thing is that you're right. It is a step of faith either way to be a Christian or any kind of theist, or to be an atheist. The only thing that doesn't require faith in any way whatsoever, as far as faith in something that you cannot prove, is to be an agnostic. That is the only rational position that is not faith-based. Because an agnostic, by the scientific definition, which, by the way, agnostic is a scientific term, and it means not to assume there is or there is not a God. An atheist assumes there is not a God. That is a leap of faith. A theist assumes there is a God. That is a leap of faith. It doesn't mean you believe with absolute certainty. It doesn't mean that you are dogmatic. It simply means that you assume there is no God. And you know what? Every atheist out there assumes there is not a God. If you are simply saying, I'm going on what is factual, what is provable, then you are agnostic. End of discussion. You are not an atheist. But what atheists do is they try to redefine atheism as meaning a form of agnosticism, because I am the default position, and unless you prove your position, I am right. That's dogmatism right there. Have fun. The thing that ticks me off about Democrats, they're labeled Catholics as far right. That was one of Biden's people that said that. They had said that the zip code they have said zip for all the attacks on Catholics. Well, and the funny thing is, Catholics, I have, part of my family, my mother's side of the family was Irish Catholic. And they were definitely not far right. Definitely not. Stanley says, yes, the California class in the shuttle is called the Yosemite. I did catch that they had a shuttle called the Yosemite, but I didn't know it was a California class. Did they say that in the episode, or is that just something they've said on the side now? Wasn't trying to agree with you about gender race of the president, just trying to state that the representation is not a bad thing. Well, but here's the problem. Representation has become code for quota. And representation, I don't have a problem with. If you pick the 10 best people, no matter what the race and gender and whatever those people are, then theoretically, especially if you have a good educational system, which we do need to work on, then you should have representation to a certain extent. However, certain things like sexual orientation shouldn't even, when you're voting for the president, does it matter who the president sleeps with? No. Right? Sexual orientation means nothing to me as far as politics, right? It's like when on my job, I'm getting so tired of this because on my job, and my job has nothing to do with any of this, they keep sending me videos and emails and all this wonderful propaganda about race and gender and sexual orientation and all this stuff. You know what they don't send anything about? Religious diversity. Nothing. They're dead silent. But no, they want to celebrate their gay employees. And it's like, why does it matter if they're gay? What does that have to do with their job? The answer is nothing. It has absolutely nothing to do with their job. So then why are we celebrating something that has nothing to do with their job? Well, you know what we should be celebrating? People that do their job well. Whatever they look like, whoever they sleep with, doesn't matter. If on the job you want to elevate people, you elevate people that are good at the job. But no, we want to elevate people that meet some kind of artificial quota. Kate says, I just hope Biden will pick someone competent. I do too. Because he's got a real chance at winning. And don't get me wrong, just because I'm a liberal, Joe Biden is a douchebag and politician, so is Trump. Almost all politicians are generally relatively crappy people. That's kind of true. Christopher says, I won't hear your response to this, but the gospel itself is an offense. That's too bad you won't hear the response to this, but we shouldn't try to add to the offensive nature of the gospel. Have a go. Thanks for the chat. I disagree. The gospel is not an offense. Now, some people are offended by the very notion of the gospel. I understand that. And though, because we live in a hypersensitive world, we live in a world where everybody wants to be offended by everything. Oh my God, you don't support X, I'm offended. Oh my God, you think that the sun, is yellow. I think the sun is purple. Well, I don't care what color you think the sun is. That's irrelevant. But no, I'm offended because you say the sun is yellow. I do not care about that. Sean is saying science is based on proof. If you don't have proof, you're talking fiction. If you want to believe, do so, but don't call it real. So here's the problem with that statement, Sean. Atheism is not science. And I understand you love science. I love science. Science is great. I don't have a problem with science. All right? Just because someone is a theist doesn't mean they hate science. And you know what? Some of the world's greatest scientists throughout history have been Christian. And you know what? Oh my God, some of them have been Muslims. And some of them have been Jews. It doesn't matter. Science is based on proof. Atheism is not. Atheism isn't science. Simple fact. Atheism is the assumption that there is no God or gods. That is all it is. Would the whole ship crew see fleeing of Wolf 359 be punished? If not, the ones who were not punished, do you think they would be looked down upon by different ships they serve on? Not necessarily. For example, if you have a captain that gives the order to turn and run, right? Now, you're the helmsman. Your job is to plot a course in the direction the captain says. Now, if you object to the order, that's fine, but you still kind of have to follow it. And so the captain is ultimately responsible. And if the captain gives that order, the captain is the one that will pay the price. As for the crew, I mean, you know what? I don't know how public they make where, like maybe if somebody says, yeah, I was on the Cerritos when we ran from Wolf 359, they might be like, ha, you're a chicken. But do I think that they would be like, oh, look, there's that guy from the Cerritos? I kind of doubt it. Herbsta says, thanks, man. I appreciate the attention. I try to keep an open mind, but I will keep looking. No problem, Herbsta, and you're always welcome here. You know that. Kate says, I would always like to see a president who isn't just another stuck-up politician. I just wish it didn't have to be Trump. I understand. No, atheism does not require faith. Of course you think that because you just want to dogmatically say you're right and everybody else is wrong. That's perfectly fine. You know what? I have no problem saying I could be wrong. You can't do it. Instead, you want to say that, no, I'm based on facts. No, you're not. You simply believe that something doesn't exist that I believe does. And you can't prove your position, and I can't prove mine. It's not a scientific question. I was once closed-minded and close-hearted to Christians because of how I was treated by them until I met you and my mind opened and my heart softened towards Christianity. Well, that's great to hear, Valor. And I'll tell you, that the problem is that there aren't enough genuine Christians out there. I get that. I do. But it's a fact. It's not a pleasant one, but it is a fact. Herbst says, fair enough, I'm not in favor of quotas, but I'm in favor of representation. Almost all old white guys, definitely not good representation president-wise. That's true, but you also have to look at the context of society, right? And this is a problem. I'm not saying it's a good defense. I'm just saying that, like, for example, we go back prior to when women could even vote, and you weren't going to see a woman elevated to that level. Women didn't run companies and stuff like that. Men did. The only time you would ever see a woman in a position of power is if their husband died and they were the only person that could take over, kind of thing. And so, that's one thing. So and so obviously, and also people of color basically had no rights. So when you look at the first 100 years of this country, it wouldn't have even been legal in all probability for someone other than a white man to be president. Then you look at the 20th century, right, where and from the beginning of the 20th century to the end of the 20th century, we made a whole lot of progress. But the problem is progress trickles up as much as it trickles down, which means that if, let's say in the 1980s, you start to get a more equal education system, it's not there yet. Here we are 40 years later, and it's not there yet, right? But you're starting to get a better a better educational system. You're starting to get more equal opportunity and stuff. And guess what? We had our first black president not too long ago. That's not, I didn't agree with Obama, but hey, that's serious progress, right? That means that now, yes, your race shouldn't matter. A black person can be elected. And I would presume that a person who was of Hispanic descent or a person of Asian descent could also be elected. I don't have a problem with any of that, right? Now, we haven't had a female president yet. Will we eventually? Sure. But I don't think we should have a female president just to have a female president. I think we need to elect whoever the best person for the job is. End of discussion. And if that person is a female, awesome. Guess what? I'm probably going to vote for a woman this year because there is a woman on the Libertarian ticket. So, yeah. Viv says that I'm actually a lot happier since I found your channel and met so many people here. That's awesome, Valor, and that's all I want to do. If we can build a community, and not a community based on agreeing, but a community just based on being a community, and that's kind of what we're doing. Why don't Andre says, anti-trekker, why don't you believe in evolution? When did I ever say I don't believe in evolution? Heck, if you look at the beginning of the stream, the song that Kyle is singing actually mentions evolution. And it doesn't mention it in as being not as being fake or something like that. Fed says, I do think this incessant of pushing sexual, racial, etc. politics is going to snap back rather harshly. Only so much rational people will take, though it is impressive how much. I'll agree with you there. Abjad says, the gospel is offensive because it requires us to recognize and accept our sinful and godless nature. Yeah, I get that, but what I'm saying is, I can't control if you're offended by the existence of God. I can't help if you're offended by the idea of submitting to a higher authority. That's fine. If you're offended by that kind of thing, then Sunday morning live streams, don't show up. That's just the honest truth. If you're truly, truly offended by the very existence of God, or the potential existence of God, you probably shouldn't be here, because we're going to talk frankly about it. And I don't hide what I believe. But, if you're not offended just by the concept and you can have a conversation, let's have a conversation. Now, Sean, I know you like to argue with me, and I'm all right with that. But at the same time, when you say dogmatic statements like what I believe in is fact and what you believe in is fiction, that's a load of crap, and it's a disingenuous argument. If you want to argue for the non-existence of God, argue for the non-existence of God. There's a difference between arguing for the non-existence of God and simply defiantly saying, neener, neener, nee, I'm right until you prove yourself. Science could show us a method used by God. Well, yeah, science, and this is where, I've said this many times in the past, but it's 100% true, and it bears repeating. Science is the understanding of how the universe works. It's the seeking of that knowledge to understand the processes and everything and how everything works together. How does the universe work? Theology, the study of God, is why the universe works. And, of course, the atheist answer to why is no reason. And that's fine. If that's your answer, that's perfectly fine. I don't find that a substantive answer, but that's perfectly fine. Science doesn't have an answer to why. Science can never answer why, because science is agnostic. It does not assume that there is or is not a God, at least properly done science. Using your reasoning, nothing besides work and job performance should be taken into account. No gender, race, sexual preference, marital status, not work-related, should be off the table. Yes, Captain Trek, that is exactly right. The only time your race or gender should matter is if you are trying to be an actor that's playing a part that is a specific race or gender. LDG says, no science is proven. Please explain that. I maybe someone said that. I didn't. Cade says, Sebek and Tarek are going to a Klingon monastery. Don't worry, there's no farts. Okay. Medicine for Your Soul says, atheism is not a monolith, and if you don't want Christianity misrepresented, maybe you should misrepresent atheism, just as you can't point out one version of Christianity. I didn't say atheism is monolithic. In fact, but the problem is that it does, just like Christianity, succumb to groupthink from time to time. And that's what we saw with Atheism Plus, right? That's why we have people like Steve Shives. That is every bit as dogmatic as any religion. The whole idea of Atheism Plus, I don't know if they still call it that or whatever they want to call themselves. Are all atheists part of Atheism Plus? No, atheists are conservative and liberal. There are atheists that are genuine, honest people, and there are disingenuous atheists like Thunderfoot, right? And they come in all stripes. And I never said that all atheists believe everything. However, the type of argumentation, such as we've been seeing from Sean during this very live stream, is far too common in atheism. Just like, as I said, the hypocrisy and horrible things that we see from Christians is too prevalent in Christianity, right? Absolutely. But, that's the way it is. Bird of Prey says, Anti-Tracker is going to throw away his vote. Man up, Anti-Tracker, you have a choice to make. Yes, and I would choose the Libertarian. Because you know what? I don't particularly care for Trump, and I certainly don't care for Joe Biden, so I'm not going to vote for either one of those. Now, the funny thing about it is it's not throwing away my vote, because I am expressing my disdain for the two major parties. And the more people that do this, the bigger a voice the independents will have, and eventually I think they will overthrow the control that the Democrats and Republicans have held over this country. And I can't wait I hope I live to see that day. But if my vote helps encourage one other person to vote Libertarian or to vote for any third party, I'm all for it. Now, as far as my vote counting, guess what? Tennessee is going to go to Trump. It's not a state that's in really debate. It's going to go to Trump. So my representative is going to vote for Trump no matter who I vote for. So, but I'm going to make my vote count. Darth Maul says, vote for what's between the ears, not between the legs. That's actually that would be a great slogan. Oh, man. Average Jeff says, Anti-Tracker, community based not on agreeing, but on being agreeable. There you go. That's a good way to put it, Aberjam. Medicine for Your Soul says, Anti-Tracker, and say this is correct. You can't point to one version of atheism and say that's atheism. Right. Atheism is simply the belief that God or gods do not exist. That's all it means. What kind of person you are behind that can be every bit as varied as any other group. But the problem is that there are many atheists that will even argue about the definition of atheism, right? No, atheism means lacking a belief. And the reason they try to change the terminology from a belief that God doesn't exist to lacking a belief in God, while on the surface you might say, well, don't those pretty much mean the same thing? What those particular people are doing, those that dogmatically say it's a lack of belief, right? And as basically that, no, what I'm trying to do is set it up so that I don't have anything to prove, but you do. Well, that's disingenuous. That's not that's a load of crap, in my opinion. Now, if someone doesn't believe, as I do, that doesn't change my opinion of that person. You know what happens if you have a douchebag that becomes a Christian? You have a douchebag Christian. It's, people's personality and their ideology there's not a cause-effect relationship there. Fed says, disagreement is beautiful. People forget that it can be a good thing. I never understood why anyone would want to be anything like the bloke next to them. Well, I've said this a million times, but if two people agree on everything, one of those two people is completely unnecessary. Kate says, I just hope the female president doesn't turn out to be Ivanka Trump. I'll be waiting to celebrate the first good female president. Well, I don't know that Ivanka Trump is interested in running for president. So, yeah, there's that. It looks like Herbsta and LD is having a great argument here about, stuff. Stanley says, pretty sure they mentioned the California cluster in the voiceover in the trailer. I didn't catch it, but, maybe I'll rewatch it and see it. And Mercer says, you defined atheism wrong. No, atheism is the belief that God or gods do not exist. If you ask someone, does God exist? If you answer that as yes, then you are some form of theist, be it a polytheist, a monotheist, whatever. A pantheist, a panentheist, whatever you happen to be. My belief would kind of fall into the panentheist category. If the answer to the question is no, then you're an atheist. If the answer to your question is, I don't know, or can't know, you're an agnostic. You're not making the assumption that God does or does not exist. Now, if you live your life with the assumption that God doesn't exist, I hope you have a great life. If you live your life with the assumption that God does exist, I hope you have a great life. And if you live your life with no assumption whatsoever, I hope you have a great life. But I'm a little tired of the disingenuous arguments from some atheists that basically try to redefine the term to simply mean I'm not you. And until you prove I'm you, I win. That's stupid. That's childish. If that's really the level of argumentation, then maybe Star Trek Lower Decks is the ultimate Star Trek for you, because that's the mentality. And quite frankly, that's why I no longer became. I used to be really, really active on the Rational Roundtable channel, debating with atheists and stuff, and I enjoyed it for a time. But then when it just got to be repeating, wash, rinse, repeat, where the atheists online would just say, I lack a belief in God, and until you prove to God exists, then I win. And that's all they wanted to say. That's it. That's being every bit as dogmatic as some Christian putting up a video saying, God exists, God is good, God is great, God gave me this chocolate cake, and if you disagree, you're going to hell. That's it. That's doing the same thing, right? You're just saying, I'm right, you're wrong, neener, neener, nee, prove it. And no matter what evidence you give, doesn't matter. There is evidence, but the problem is there's no proof, right? There's only evidence. And evidence is also quite subjective. For example, that beautiful sunrise. Some people see that and see the artistry of God. Some people see that and they say, what an amazing coincidence. Whatever. That's fine. I don't have a problem with you believing that this is all the result of naturalistic processes and that it all happened without guidance, blah, blah, blah. I don't have a problem with you believing that. I really don't. I have a problem with you trying to say that's not a belief. I was raised as a Lutheran, but over time I found myself more agnostic as I grew older. Well, and that's a problem with many of the denominations, like the Experience Church, the one that I go to, is a non-denominational church. The problem with denominations is their dogma that they hold. The tenets of the individual denominations sometimes are outright violations of what's in the Bible. Sometimes are very hypocritical. And that's a major problem in Christianity today. And that's why it's kind of hard to find a non-denominational church in the American South. Most people here are Baptists and Methodists. Never would have expected to see a lot of Methodist churches, but there are a lot of Methodist churches and a lot of Baptist churches. There's a Baptist church on like every street corner. Bob's Baptist Church, they're everywhere. But the truth is, I don't like subscribing to doctrine and dogma, especially if it's contradictory to what the Bible actually says. I am interested in what the Bible says, not in what someone writes about the Bible. Val says, I may just write in anti-tracker. After all, might as well have an actual piece of crap in office. Well, thank you, Val. I might have to start running. Medicine for Yourself says, but you're putting impossible burden on an atheist if you say they have to prove God's unexistence. You can prove the existence of something. How can you prove non-existence? Meta, I'm not putting, an atheist put an impossible burden on the theist by saying you have to prove God exists. You cannot prove God exists, and you cannot prove God doesn't exist. It's not a proof statement. And that's the problem, Meta, is that a lot of people think that this is about proof. if it's all about proof, neither side wins. All right? If I can't, I can't prove to you anything. I can't prove to you that this is a glass. This could be a digital effect, right? This could be your brain having some kind of delusion that I'm holding an object and my hand's actually empty. It could be that I'm just a computer program. I can't prove to you this glass exists, but you probably accept that it does because you go by the assumptions that I am real, that this glass is real, that reality is pretty much as we perceive it, right? But that's not proof. That's just that we have better evidence for that. When it comes to something that we cannot see directly, then it becomes a little more interesting as far as what is proof and where is your faith. Because, for example, has anybody collected a sample of the sun? The answer is obviously no. You can't even get close enough to the sun without, burning up and all that. And there's nothing that man can build at this point that could actually survive a landing on the surface of the sun, collect a sample, and bring it back. That's not even possible right now. However, we pretty much accept that the composition of the sun is mostly hydrogen and little trace elements of this and that. And the reason we do that is, we say, we can tell that by analyzing the light spectrum, which we assume is 100% consistent for everything. And, we measure the distance to the stars based on assumptions that this is accurate and this is accurate and this is accurate. None of that is absolute concrete proof. But we have faith that the scientific method is giving us accurate information and that the scientists are not lying to us, right? And that's perfectly fine. I don't have a problem with that. You don't have a problem with that. But what about where it all came from? What's the source of everything? Well, the problem is science can't answer that because science can only examine what is observable and draw conclusions based on repetitive observation and testing. We can't observe anything before the Big Bang. In fact, we can barely observe the Big Bang itself through the microwave background radiation. But we cannot observe anything prior to that. We can only speculate. Because even the best of physicists will tell you that the laws of physics break down at the point that they refer to as a singularity. Not possible to calculate anything prior to that. That's why you can't calculate what's on the inside of a black hole, because gravitational forces and stuff become so extreme that laws of physics completely break down. There's nothing that we have that can explain it right now. Now, we do have interesting ideas like string theory and stuff like that, although string theory is really string hypothesis. It's not a theory at all because it's not testable. But that's just an interesting hypothesis. Now, Christians put forth the God hypothesis, that God created the universe and in some way spoke the universe into existence, and that's what triggered the Big Bang, blah, blah, blah. Atheists say either we don't know, or they want to refer to string theory or something else. That's all fine and dandy. But the simple fact is, there's no way to prove it. There's no way to prove anything about it. Just not. There's no way to do it. And so, for either side to say that the other side has to prove their position is a dishonest argument. I'm not saying atheists have to prove God doesn't exist. But if you want to give me a real argument, give me a real argument. Don't sit there and cross your arms and tell me I win because you can't prove God does exist. God is an unprovable thing. What if aliens from Pluto threaten to destroy Earth unless they reclassify it as a planet again? I think we'd reclassify it as a planet very quickly. I will say that the older I get, the more appreciation, I appreciate religion, in particular Christianity, since I feel conversion out of it is a bit disrespectful for more positive aspects. Well, that's the problem, is that people don't see the positive aspects of Christianity. They only see, because the news isn't going to show you churches feeding the poor. The news isn't going to show you, like, the fact that the Experienced Church, we literally bought a piece of property in Uganda and set up an orphanage there, and we're building a school, and we're doing all this stuff there. That's not going to be on the news. What's going to be on the news is when some pastor has an affair with a gay hooker. That's what makes the news. The irony of the disingenuous flying spaghetti monster argument is that by the argument's own logic, the monster may actually exist, making it a self-defeating argument. That's kind of funny. But the reason I get upset about the flying spaghetti monster is because it is, in fact, an absolute mockery of any kind of religion. It's not meant to be taken seriously. And the problem is that you have people, and this is where like me and Mr. Miles fought hard about this, and he was very offended by my statements. And I feel bad that he was offended by it. I really do. But the flying spaghetti monster is inherently a disingenuous argument, because you're trying to say this is just as likely as your God, which is a load of crap, right? To suggest that a flying piece of leftover food is that created the universe is just as likely as a all-powerful being creating the universe is, inherently stupid. And the only and people that try to make the argument, then they try to say how serious they are about it, is that, oh yeah, I am absolutely serious. It's absolutely what I believe. And they're lying to you. And if you want to, and I know, it's like, it's just the stupid thing is everybody knows nobody believes in it. And so if you want to sit there and say that people do believe in it, you go have fun with that. I'm out. Darren says, I have the opinion that theoretical physics is pseudoscience, not that my opinion matters much. Well, theoretical physics is just that, theoretical. It's non-proven physics. Not all Christians believe that God spoke the existence a Big Bang, sir. I understand that, Aberjam. There are differing beliefs on how the process happened, but the general gist of it is that whatever created the universe was God speaking and saying, let there be light. LG said, all caps, says, what the F is the flying spaghetti monster? Look it up. It's all over the place. And then he super chats it. And you've never heard of the flying spaghetti monster? Really? The flying spaghetti monster, I'll tell you, I can't remember the name of the person that came up with it, but the guy basically created the flying spaghetti monster as a counter-argument to intelligent design. That when Christians, there were certain Christian groups that were trying to get intelligent design taught in schools as a viable alternative to evolution. The idea is that, well, if you look at the way life is, it was clearly designed and blah, 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 blah. And of course, some people were saying you're just trying to get your religion into the schools, which is kind of true. But, and there's the actual super chat. We'll wait for that real quick. And I am going to wrap up in just a minute, guys, because I got to work in a little bit.
What the F is the flying spaghetti monster?
Right. So this guy wrote a paper basically saying that, basically making the argument that there is a flying spaghetti monster that designed all life, and that should be taught right alongside intelligent design. He was basically an anti-intelligent design argument. Now, people have since adopted the flying spaghetti monster, and very notable atheists like Richard Dawkins and others use the Christian God is by suggesting that the flying spaghetti monster, which is literally a lump of spaghetti with two meatballs for eyes, that is just as likely as the God of the Bible. And so it's ridiculous and stupid. And many atheists, unfortunately, try to use it as a serious form of argumentation, even though it's ridiculous and stupid. Stanley says, when was the pastor scandal? I don't care about the church, but I'm interested in hearing about the disgrace of religious figure. I'll tell you, you know what I'm talking about. There have been many times where if a pastor or a family member of a famous pastor or something does something bad, then that's all over the news. But a church actually helping people? Nah, we're not interested in that. How many soup kitchens does the Catholic Church run right now that are not on the news? Fed says, now there's a question. Would a priest whom is gay or whatnot be considered less adherent for his sin, or being more so for combating his sin by service to God and tending to the flock? That's actually a good question, Fed, and it's actually based on a false premise. The premise being that being gay is a sin. And that's a big problem that we miss. Being gay is not a sin. Anti-Trekker, how could you say that? Because just like, being straight is not a sin either, but adultery is, right? It's not what you desire. Being tempted by something is not the same as sinning, right? If you are attracted to people of the same gender, That's not a sin. It's simply part of who you are. If you're attracted to, every woman you see, that's not a sin. That's just part of who you are. It's your actions that are sinful, not your desires. And so, as far as a priest who is gay, but he combats his sin by focusing on servitude to God, yeah, no problem with that. There are also Protestants that, like I had a good friend that went to a church we went to, and he was gay, and he came to God after he was diagnosed with AIDS, or HIV positive, I should say, because he didn't have full-blown AIDS. And he decided that, that what he was doing was destructive and that he didn't want to do that, and he wanted to avoid that kind of sin in his life. So he just chose to become celibate, and it was very difficult for him. And he was tempted every day, right? That's difficult. It's hellaciously difficult. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like for someone like that. My heart goes out to anybody who has that kind of a desire and can't act on it in good consciousness. But the desire itself is not sinful, only the action upon that desire. If you get to heaven and God presents himself to you as a spaghetti monster just for laughs, I'm going to laugh my tits off. Yeah, I tell you, if God actually did that, I would laugh too. But I think God does have a sense of humor. I certainly hope so, from what Piano Dean has Joshua doing. Since we're talking about the churches of Subgenius, All Hail Bob, and Trigger, also Fnord. I have no idea what the Church of Subgenius is, but okay. Darren says, Richard Dawkins has gone on the record supporting the notion of intelligent design unless it's a Judeo-Christian God. Yeah, Richard Dawkins is... Yeah, he's Richard Dawkins. Arguably, what you desire is sinful, even if you don't act on it. I'm sure you know the verse. Actually, hold on a second.
Is lust not a sin? What about coveting your neighbor's wife?
Right, but that's not the same as seeing... so I understand where you're coming from with this. What you have to separate temptation from indulgence. All right? Temptation is a beautiful woman walks in front of you and you're like, wow, that's hot, right? That's temptation. Lust is when you sit there and you're like, I'd like to do that. That's where you're starting to indulge in it, where you're living out a fantasy life, so to speak, within your sin, where you start focusing on that in your thought process. And that's what I want to do. That's where I want to go, right? That's where the sin begins. That's when they talk about adultery of the heart and that kind of thing, right? And that, or committing adultery of the heart. When you look upon someone with lust, right? There's a difference between desire and lust. Desire means I want that, but not for me, so I'm not going to do that, right? Lust is, oh man, I want that. Yeah, I want some of that right there. Yeah, that's the difference. I hope I was able to illustrate that well enough for you to understand. But so it's not. There's a difference between indulging in it in your thought life and simply being tempted by it. Temptation is never a sin. Indulgence is almost always a sin. Indy says, I'm attracted to Zoe Saldana and Alicia Eve, and that's not a sin. Got it. It's not a sin to find Zoe Saldana attractive. It would be a sin to sit there and fantasize about what you would like to do with her. Jeff says, Star Trek the Animated Series is infinitely better than Star Trek Lower Decks, and it's all my fault. Now, it's not your fault, but I do agree that Star Trek the Animated Series is many times better. And Jit says, I don't know either, really. It's pure chaos, irony, and satire, and Spaghetti Monster is a weak derivative of it. Yeah, it's just, yeah. President Carter admitted to the sin of lustful thoughts. If he can do it, so can I. Well, actually, just because President Carter admitted to doing that doesn't make it okay. He's just admitting that he is a faulty human being like anybody else, and that he's thought about doing horrible things and, has tried to turn his back on it. And so you shouldn't take that as a permission slip to do what he did, because Jimmy Carter is a great guy. You're not trying to, as a Christian, and I don't know where you stand with that, but as a Christian, your goal is not to be like Jimmy Carter. Your goal is to be like Christ. Jimmy Carter may have been a great guy, but he's not Christ. And Aberjam says, "Oh yeah, I want some of that every time I see shirtless lore." Wow. Well, that's a great way to wrap things up. So I do need to run, guys, because I got to work in just a little bit. But thank you so much for hanging out with me these last couple hours. It's been a lot of fun, and I think we had some good conversation. And so with that, take care. Hey, see, I got the credits to work again.
Making your way with the nerds today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from hating JJ sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to just get laid? Sometimes you wanna go where all the Trekkies know your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be in a galaxy where Star Trek isn't lame. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Turds of a feather flock together, that's what we believe. We know a place that's got you covered, a place to get relief. Wouldn't you like to say me poo? Sometimes you wanna go where Turnistannies know your name, and old Kurogans are to blame. You wanna be where you can see Kuroga go up in flames. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
You son of a bitch, anti-tracker!